ideas such as order and authority, the conditions for an ordered society. The opposites are disorder and lawlessness, and a panic about grammar is therefore interpretable as a metaphorical expression of persistent conservative fears that we are losing the values that underpin civilization and sliding into chaos. So the idea that proper grammar very much orders society and keeps each person in their proper place. And that if we allowed a multiplicity of views, that would suddenly fragment this power and might actually give it to some people who are currently not the dominant group. Another institution that uses language very much to gain power and to regulate what we have access to in society is the publishing industry. First off, it's the very decision of who gets published, who is allowed to have a voice in society. Currently, most of who is published are Western authors. And of those Western authors, it's usually just those from the United States and the UK. For instance, in Italy right now, 50 to 90% of their published work are translations from other Western authors, not native Italian writers. Whereas in the US, that's just 3.5%, so it's mostly Anglophone writers. I have a little video clip to show you that talks about this idea. It's by Chimamanda Adichie, and she is a Nigerian writer and talks about the danger of a single story, of the danger of excluding certain narratives from our community of literature.
I'm a storyteller, and I would like to tell you a few personal stories about what I like to call the danger of the single story. I grew up on a university campus in eastern Nigeria. My mother says that I started reading at the age of 2, although I think 4 is probably close to the truth. So I was an early reader, and what I read were British and American children's books. I was also an early writer, and when I began to write at about the age of 7, stories in pencil with crayon illustrations that my poor mother was obligated to read, I wrote exactly the kinds of stories I was reading. All my characters were white and blue-eyed. They played in the snow. They ate apples. And they talked a lot about the weather, how lovely it was that the sun had come out. Now this despite the fact that I lived in Nigeria. I had never been outside Nigeria. We didn't have snow. We ate mangoes. And we never talked about the weather because there was no need to. My characters also drank a lot of ginger beer because the characters in the British books I read drank ginger beer. Never mind that I had no idea what ginger beer was. And for many years afterwards, I would have a desperate desire to taste ginger beer. But that is another story. What this demonstrates, I think, is how impressionable and vulnerable we are in the face of a story, particularly as children. Because all I had read were books in which characters were foreign, I had become convinced that books, by their very nature, had to have foreigners in them, and had to be about things with which I could not personally identify. Now things changed when I discovered African books. There weren't many of them available, and they weren't quite as easy to find as the foreign books, but because of writers like Chinua Achebe and Kamara Lai, I went through a mental shift in my perception of literature. I realized that people like me, girls with skin the color of chocolate, whose kinky hair could not form ponytails, could also exist in literature. I started to write about things I recognized. Now I loved those American and British books I read. They stirred my imagination, they opened up new worlds for me. But the unintended consequence was that I did not know that people like me could exist in literature. So what the discovery of African writers did for me was this: it saved me from having a single story of what books are.
So Adichie is talking about the publishing industry and the fact that currently stories from Westerners are the most frequently circulated, and that really limits the range of experiences that readers are allowed access to. Secondly, there's power in translation. So the idea that one culture is invested with the power, with the ability to interpret the words of another. And often the fear is that people will use stereotypes as a sort of heuristic device. So something that allows them to assume what the author is talking about, and that those stereotypes will then become embedded in the translation. Venuti, talking about translation, talks about a labor of acculturation which domesticates the foreign text, making it intelligible and even familiar to the target language reader, providing him or her with the narcissistic experience of recognizing his or her own cultural other. So making the text sort of comfortable, recognizable for that other reader that may be contrary to what the novel actually embodies. And then, of course, those who don't get translated at all then just get erased from the body of mainstream literature. This has often been done with women and also dissidents. Their voices are not even allowed a chance to circulate. And yeah, so that was sort of the final grand institution that uses language to control the way, what information we have access to, which then goes on to determine the way we think. I thank you so much for listening to my presentation, and I hope that this will give you some ability to recognize when certain words and phrases and institutions are employing techniques to subconsciously convey certain ideas, certain power relationships through language.